afternoon, sir. I'm Chaplain Captain Donnell Bethea, and I'll be doing a presentation on moral injury. Moral injury is an important topic for us to discuss as a military team, as an Air Force team, because it affects us all. It's often something that we don't talk about much, and it often gets confused with different things, but it's important for us to focus on moral injury and how it can and often does affect our unit. So my objectives for this presentation will be to talk about our mission first as a chaplain corps, to solidify what we actually do here, and to answer the question, what is moral injury? I'll give a definition of that and who suffers from it, or how it affects us. And I'll give some wing statistics that I've taken or that we have taken as a chaplain corps here for the 94th Airlift Wing. How can we treat it? Or what are we going to do about it as a chaplain corps to make sure that we give our members everything that they need to be successful, and to realize that they're not struggling with this or suffering with it on their own, but they in fact have help. And I'll give you my point of contact information just in case you have questions, comments, or concerns, or if you know someone who's struggling with moral injury. So first, our mission as a chaplain corps, our mission is to improve resiliency services for all of our Air Force members and to help them take better care of themselves, especially during challenging times. And moral injury is something that could and often does create challenging times for our service members and their families. So we're here to provide that added support that people might need when they are experiencing moral injury or other challenging times. Okay, now for our definition of what moral injury is. Before I actually give a definition of what it is, I want to say what it isn't. A moral injury is not post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. And I'll say that again. Moral injury is not post-traumatic stress disorder. The two are often confused because sometimes the symptoms can be the same. Somebody who's struggling with PTSD might have some of the same symptoms as someone who's struggling with moral injury, but the two are different because PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder is fear-based and moral injury is not fear-based. So moral injury is not post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, what moral injury is? Moral injury is the distressing psychological behavioral, social, and sometimes spiritual aftermath of exposure to such events. Or I'll also give a definition from our spiritual dimensions of moral injury. It's a contribution of mental health chaplains in the Canadian Armed Forces. And it says moral injury describes the profound distress experienced by military personnel as a result of a violation of personal beliefs. In other words, that means that, when somebody does something that goes against what they believe spiritually or something that they believe is morally wrong, it will cause moral injury. It's often called a soul tear, as some authors who have written about it have said. It's a soul wound or soul tear, but we call it moral injury because this person can't get back to normal because they have experienced something that was just traumatic for them. You know, either they hurt someone that they believe they should not have hurt, or they caused some kind of damage or did not stop some kind of damage that was done. And most of our service members who are overseas in deployed environments are often given orders to do certain things. And these things might go against what they believe spiritually. So when they come back, you know, they're left to live with that. And some of them believe that they have to struggle and suffer alone. They don't have a frame of reference to say, you know, hey, I'm struggling with moral injury, or I'm struggling with something. So yes, this is the actual working definition that we have for moral injury. It's something that causes a soul tear in someone. And just to give an example of this, you know, I use this from the VA psychiatrist Jonathan Shea. He coined that term moral injury in the 1990s, but the phenomenon predates its naming by millennia. In the ancient Greek epic, the Iliad, the hero Achilles loses his best friend, Patroclus, in battle, and then inwardly tortures himself because he failed to shield Patroclus from harm. When world wars broke out in the 20th century, people labeled as battle fatigue the returning soldiers who bore mental scars. But there it was in the Iliad where Achilles, you know, he did not protect his friend, or he felt in his heart that he did not protect his friend. So he was experiencing torture on the inside because he had a soul wound. Okay, how it occurs. How it occurs. A moral injury can occur in response to acting or witnessing behaviors that go against an individual's values and moral beliefs. So how it occurs, as I mentioned earlier, service members go on a deployment and they're told to do something. For example, an airman is told to go out on patrol, and this airman comes in contact with someone who, let's say a 15-year-old kid or a 13-year-old kid or some small child. They come in contact with a small child, and this small child is a terrorist who's trying to attack his squad. So this airman has to shoot this individual who's a terrorist, but just so happens to be a child. So in doing that, you know, he saves his squad from harm, but in his mind, he believes that killing a child is wrong. But he had to kill a child to save that squad. So how do we deal with that? You know, he was following orders and he did the right thing in that given situation, but he's experiencing some distress. So there has to be a way for him to receive some help in a situation like that, because he's not going to be able to be made whole, and he may not trust himself based on that decision that he had to make. You know, whenever he's around a child, or whenever he sees a child, maybe in his family or at his church or wherever he may go, he might remember that time he had to kill a child that was their age. So that's how it occurs. It occurs in a situation that could be perfectly legal. You know, it's perfectly legal for these acts to take place, but the after effects or the unseen wounds of those things have lasting effects. And again, who suffers? Our airmen who come back from these deployments. They suffer. They suffer from these kinds of wounds, and many times they won't go and talk to anybody about these wounds that they're experiencing. They'll just try to push through and they'll try to complete the mission, because, you know, as airmen, that's what we've been taught in basic military training or officer training school, we're taught to adapt and overcome. You know, if we're experiencing some difficulties, we have to push through those difficulties, keep going so that we can complete the mission. But in this case, these airmen are not going to be able to push through. You know, their pushing through is only going to cause more stress and distress. So we have to help them. They are going to definitely suffer after coming back from these deployments, or it's a good chance that they will suffer after coming back from a deployment. And we have our medical unit here, our medical staff. You know, they've been experiencing this too, because they've had to provide so much support for so many people during the COVID-19 vaccine time, when, you know, everybody was rushing into medical to get a vaccine, and people had so many questions about the vaccine. Some people didn't trust, you know, getting a vaccine, so they had to answer so many questions, and they had to often administer these shots to people who didn't want the shot. So it was just difficult for them. And they had to experience moral injury because they were called to do something that in their minds might have not been the right thing to do. So we definitely want to keep our medical staff, even if they did not deploy, we want to make sure that we care for them because they could be experiencing moral injury. Which also brings me to a point that, you know, moral injury is something that can happen to airmen, not just the airmen who deploy, but moral injury is something that can happen right here, stateside, or during peacetime. So it's not something that we can just say, you know, oh, you never deployed, so you're not experiencing moral injury. No, we can't say that. Moral injury can happen at any time. So we want to be aware of that. Now, I also want to show you some stats here, you know, that we have taken as a chaplain corps. You know, this is our, for mental fitness, you know, ability to bounce back. And we have overall around 80% of our members report that they tend to navigate stress events well, while around 4 to 8% have a much tougher time managing stressful events. And as we see in this first graph here, that says it does not take me long to recover from a stressful event. We have 472 that strongly agree, and we have 110 who are neutral, and 105 who disagree with that. Some of those people, it may take a while, and when we look at this, it shows, you know, on the graph that most people strongly agree with these questions, just like the second one. You know, I usually come through difficult times with little trouble. You know, the numbers are high for people who strongly agree with that statistic. But there are individuals who are not sure, or some who strongly disagree with that. And I would even challenge those who strongly agree with it. You know, some of them are probably trying to push through the survey that we passed out just to kind of get it out of the way, because we know how things are when we come to drill weekend. There are so many things to do and not enough time to do these things. So we have to rush and get through things, and they might have rushed through and just answered quickly, but thankfully there are people who did admit that, you know, they have a difficult time bouncing back when difficult things happen. So we know that those who are experiencing moral injury will have a difficult time bouncing back. And some of these individuals who have taken this mental fitness assessment are probably some of those who are experiencing moral injury, and they slip through the cracks some kind of way. And that's why, you know, later on in this briefing, I want to discuss some ways that we, as a chaplain corps here, can provide support to those who are experiencing moral injury, and, you know, trying to find more effective ways to seek out those who are suffering with moral injury, because sometimes they're not going to come to us as a chaplain corps, because again, they're so busy. They're so busy trying to get through and get the mission done. But if we have things in place that gives them some kind of language to understand and be able to talk about, some of the things that they're going through, then that's going to help them out, and that's going to help them to get through the moral injury that they're facing. It may not eliminate it, but it will help them to get through. And here are some more statistics that we have taken here, just to show you the mental fitness, the suicide risk, and we do have some people here who are, going through a divorce. Some people have lost their jobs, or they have experienced some difficult financial problems here recently, or some have even experienced some stressful legal problems. So it's going to be important for us as a chaplain corps to stand up and meet these individuals' needs, because they're coming from all corners. So this moral injury is definitely something that we have to be aware of, because we are on the deployment chalk. So our deployment is coming up soon, and there are always deployments that are on the horizon. So if we build up how we prepare now for the crisis that may be coming, we'll be prepared when it actually comes. And just some more overall fitness statistics here to show what we've done as a chaplain corps, and trying to find out who's struggling with what kind of issue and who may be struggling with moral injury. Chaplain corps recommendations. Chaplain corps recommendations. People have moral injury. We're the chaplain corps, and we're here to help. We're here to assist them as they go through those struggles. So how can we fix it, or how can we minimize it as much as possible? Our plan moving forward, sir, is to do lunch and learns. Do mandatory lunch and learns. We can provide food for our airmen during a lunch period, and during that lunch period, we can do a presentation on moral injury to talk to them about the importance of moral injury. And we can also do a lunch and learn on emotional intelligence. That will come after we did the moral injury. We would like to do the lunch and learn on moral injury just to give people some words to think about, as they go through what they're going through, because sometimes they'll just go through and when they start to hear different terms, or if they hear the definition moral injury and we explain what it is, they'll say, oh yeah, they'll have an aha moment, and they'll say, oh yeah, I am experiencing that right now. So once they hear that there's actually a definition for that, and they see that someone is there to, try to help them work through that, it will open a door for them to come see the chaplain. We'll definitely open up a time for those who would like to come and talk to the chaplains after that training. We'll make sure that we make the time for them, and that's what it'll be all about. Just to go through and talk to them and discuss whatever they would like to discuss, and just give them time to tell their story. And our goal will be to give them some positive affirmations to help them realize that they are good people and they were following orders, and that doesn't, just because they're experiencing this moral injury or they feel bad about it, it does not mean that they are a failure. And another thing that we can do is we can do deployment debriefings. Deployment debriefings. Many times we as chaplains go on the deployment line to talk to individuals who are about to deploy. Sometimes we don't get people to come and talk to us, but we can do a presentation during that time, along with the other helping agencies, do a presentation that discusses moral injury so they can at least know what it is before they go off to that deployment. And if they know about it or if they've heard about it, they'll at least be mindful of it, and they'll have ways to look for it in their other troops. Leaders will be able to see if their troops are struggling through moral injury, and those leaders will be empowered to send those troops to chaplains to deal with those issues that they're struggling with. So yes, we would want to do it on the front end as a chaplain corps, and we would also like to do it on the back end. When these airmen get back from their respective deployments, there's a checklist that needs to be checked off. And when those airmen come to us with that checklist, sometimes they come one at a time, and sometimes it might not be as one at a time, but when they come to us, we take them into our office and we'll just have a conversation with them. Try to ask them some questions from a questionnaire, a moral injury questionnaire, to see if they're struggling with some moral injury, or just to see if they want to talk about some things that occurred on that deployment that didn't quite sit well with them. We'll give them that opportunity to talk to us before signing off on their paperwork. So deployment briefings before they go, and deployment debriefings when they get back. And we'll have a strong partnership with other helping agencies here on base. We'll work with these other helping agencies to let our airmen know that we're all here to help. This is not a competition. If you go over to this agency, you can't come over to us. Or if you come to us, you can't go to that helping agency. We want to partner with these helping agencies here on base to make sure that all of our airmen know the resources that are available to them for moral injury or whatever they might be struggling with in that moment. And also, I'm working on a partnership with Emory University Hospital, because they have a good veterans program. And in their veterans program, they accept people in and they bring you in, they house you for a couple of weeks, and you're able to work through these kinds of situations with other veterans who are going through some of the same things that you're going through as far as moral injury is concerned. So you're in a group, and in that group you get to realize that I'm not the only one struggling through this, and that's all some people need sometimes, because sometimes it feels like we are the only ones who are experiencing something. And when it feels like we're the only ones experiencing something, we feel alone and we feel abandoned. But once we see that there are others who are struggling with some of the same things, then we're encouraged to speak up and speak out about what we're going through. And that is the same for moral injury. So we want to work with Emory University Hospital to their veterans program to make sure that we tell our airmen that they can go to this program, that's headed up by a retired Army chaplain who I know well, and he's really good at helping airmen, Marines, or soldiers, sailors work through problems with post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury. And as a unit, we want to have Moral Injury Awareness Month. We all know that June is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Month, or we, open up awareness for that. We want to also open up awareness for moral injury. So we want to make August Moral Injury Health Awareness Month, or Moral Injury Awareness Month. And in that month, we can send out emails or have different kinds of things that we offer to let people know what moral injury is and how we can combat moral injury. But it's all about bringing the awareness, because it's been around for a while, but so many people don't know what it is. So we want them to know what it is, and we want them to be aware of all these resources that we have available, so that they can take advantage and use these resources that we have. And it's important because we want our airmen to know that we care. Ultimately, we want our airmen to know that we care about them. We care about the mission, and I know from a leadership perspective, mission is number one. But if we don't have mentally healthy airmen to go out and accomplish the mission, it does not get done. So we want them to be spiritually healthy as they do this mission that they've been called to do here in the military. So we want to make sure that they are not experiencing moral injury, or that we address the moral injury that they are facing. That's why it's extremely important. And here is my contact information. If you have any other comments, questions that you would like to ask, I can be reached by phone or by email. And I would love to have a more conversation about this, because it really is important to our unit's overall readiness. Are there any questions? Thank you.